And here we are. So welcome again, everybody who is joining us. This is again Raphael, Bennett, and Aleš Balcar having a conversation about what's coming up for us around a specific topic. And today we want to talk about the moments when you want to give up. These moments. One moment in here. I see I have a little feedback. So these moments are very common. So I read somewhere and I like that we can definitely tell that most of New Year's resolution would not survive February. It's definitely true for me more often than not. I can even see it on my calendar where I have like a tracker of my commitments, and after like week 3, I can see some cracks in my commitment, and later on it kind of falls apart, and then it brings shame. It brings the sense of failure, which later hampers my commitment to go on. So I would like to share these feelings I have around that. I'm sure Raphael will too, and then we see how to tackle that. If there's a good way, or if even the question of a good way makes sense for us. I've been talking for quite a while, so I'm going to shut up. Raphael, you look very dignified today. Over to you. What's coming up for you around the topic, and how are you in general?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I like you said, I had a legitimate reason today to bow out, planned power
Oh yeah.
outage here, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll go for a hike with the kids today, and which we're gonna do later anyway. But in any case, there was a window, and I even found myself kind of talking to my spouse about it, and kind of like waiting for for someone to extend the invitation, like, yeah, it's okay, don't need to do it today. Today's a great opportunity to not do it. And I'd been thinking about topic ideas, and one of the ideas was sticking with it when you want to quit. And so I thought, like, this is what we're committed to doing. So it will come up. In fact, it's likely to come up often when we're doing something that is difficult or uncertain, or whatever it is, challenging. There will be a lot of moments where you don't feel like doing it. Personally, I found that even doing a half-ass job during those times, kind of fake it till you make it, or show up in whatever capacity you're able to, rather than let it fly by. And that, I think, helps build momentum, which I think is a key word to kind of sticking with things. So, you mentioned like the gym memberships. A lot of people join New Year's, right? By February, that cuts in half, and by March, it's like whatever small percent. So I don't know. Maybe start in November or December, get the momentum going. So by the time all the newbies are joining in January, you've already got a nice little routine going.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes. I think it goes much deeper in, not just in terms of quitting or wanting to quit. Maybe we want to go through the arc. So if you want to quit, how to prevent yourself from quitting. I think that's what we very often read in these self-help magazines. I think we should spend a little time on that. But then
Sure.
I want to go into this very painful spot for me. This is once I
Mm-hmm.
quit, and I do quit often, and I give
Mm-hmm.
up, or I really don't go through that hurdle successfully. How to get back on the horse without too much of a remorse. And hey, we can
Yeah.
turn this into a poetry session, maybe. Anyway, so how to get back on the horse without feeling that I failed, and
Mm-hmm.
how to re-energize myself, which is something that's for me especially tricky. And I'd like to tackle both of those, if it's okay with you. But let's
Definitely.
start with the first one. I know you took on a lot of commitments, and it's not easy for you. You are my role model in many ways, and um, this itch to quit and get yourself kind of off the hook must be coming up fairly often. So I want to hear about that, and
Mhm.
how do you manage those moments, and maybe what you learned from the moments in the past when you didn't manage that successfully. What are the lessons learned in there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that if you're taking on a lot of new commitments, some of them may not be worth sticking with, right? So if you're experimenting and you're still in this phase of trying stuff out, um, it can be actually really important to know when to quit certain things. That being said, it can also be kind of an exit. Oh, that wasn't working out. So, I think giving something a fair shot. And again, it depends what we're talking about here. Um, if you're committed to making a change in your health, you may be experimenting with various styles or different types of exercises or whatever, and you may find some things are not working out for you and others are. So in which case, doing something would be the commitment, right? Not quitting entirely. That I think I mentioned earlier about kind of showing up even in some half-ass capacity for something like that. Often it's that kind of beginning that's really hard. So I'll give you an example. For the last 5 months, I've committed to doing a kettlebell training session twice a week. I've been trying to get back on that for quite some time and was having a lot of difficulty sticking with it, with that particular training. It was only when I made a commitment to a specific day. So for me, it was Mondays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. That's when there was no negotiation on when it was happening. So it was very clear this was the time. Now, there were many times in the last 5 months where that time of the day would come on that day. And I had a lot of reasons that I didn't feel like doing it. I'm too tired. I'm too sore. I'm too busy. I've been on Zoom all day and don't want to do this. What I have found is that when you can get through that initial friction of beginning, I've had some of my best days on following a lot of resistance initially and just kind of breaking through. And I've also had some not spectacular days where it's just kind of going through the motions, kind of feeling like it's more difficult than the week before that week. And, oh, why am I not making progress in the way that I would like to, right? Sticking with it anyway. And I like to remind myself, so those days come and they feel like choice points. So this is a choice point. You can let the habit go or you can persist. And that's where the momentum comes. After several weeks of sticking to your challenges or your commitments, it does begin to become easier to stick to it than to not. For me, the nagging is just too great. I get this internal kind of, no, you've got to do this. This is something you've committed to doing. We're here. We're doing this. Same with our broadcast this morning, right? You gave me a beautiful out. I texted you. I said, hey, I'm not sure. I've got a power outage. I'll be using my laptop and, using my hotspot. And I said, oh, that's a legitimate reason to back off. So here we are, sticking to it despite whatever comes up. And I often use the examples of exercise because that's what I have been most familiar with over the last few years. Those are the things that I've had to overcome and still am very much. So, it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, it's all easy from here. Every time that day comes, there are a lot of reasons and excuses not to do it. I think for me, a part of it is kind of identifying with a certain way of being and saying like, okay, I identify as the type of person that doesn't miss a workout. And when you can really get into that mindset, it's not that the physical act becomes easier necessarily, but when you take the negotiation out of the equation and you say, well, I can't commit to having a good session, but I will commit to showing up and doing it. I'll commit to that part. and the rest you can improve with time. Yeah.
I like it, and it is of course relatable and valid, and of course I recognize in that our favorite author James Clear with this identity building. So identity of an athlete, what does an athlete do on regular basis? So rather than the
Yeah.
goal, the lean body mass gain or whatever, but what would you do on daily basis? I like that. It's also another one, and I wonder how this really relates to your experience. There is this popular advice of the first 5 seconds of the activity. When you put yourself into the activity, sometimes they say first 5 minutes. Do allow yourself to do 5 minutes, or just put your jogging shoes on
Yes.
without doing
Yes.
anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely worked for me for some small things, like when I did this kind of cold showers challenge. Because then, if you
Sure.
do 5 seconds of cold shower, then you're basically through the pain.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work for me well for the activities when my brain knows that I'm actually trying to fool it, and when I know it's actually a long churn. How does this work for you?
Yeah. So we're back to the word friction, right? So if you're trying to create a new habit, we want to reduce friction as much as possible, right? If you're trying to break a bad habit, you want to create more friction. An example would be deleting the Facebook app from your phone and requiring yourself to open a browser, log in, enter the username and the password each time. So that's creating friction, right? Removing friction, so we'll use it exercise as an example. Let's say you want to go for a run. So you lay out your shorts, you lay out your shoes, you have a timer set for the time that you're going to start, and you create a kind of easily reachable. So you don't say, okay, I haven't ran in a year, I'm going to do 5 miles or something. So just commit to something like a quarter mile, for example. So you're removing the decision making. You want to remove as many decisions from the task once you arrive. So if you know the date, you know the day of the week, you know the time of day, you know what you're going to be doing. Now your job is just to show up and start moving. But if you have to get there and you're like, oh, I said I was going to work out today, but I have no idea. Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? How long am I going to do it for? Where am I going to do it? So the more of those questions you can answer ahead of time, the more specific you can be and say, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes doing this activity, or 5. Again, we're trying to reduce friction, get the momentum going, create a habit. I think a problem for a lot of people is they take on too much too quickly, and maybe you have a few good days and you hit the ground running, and then it's like, oh man, that was really hard. The next time you show up, you just don't have the energy to keep it going. So I'll go back to the kettlebells for a second. For me, I kept starting and quitting this thing. And, I've got a ton of work ahead of me to keep this up. But the change was being very specific about the day and time, and being very specific about exactly what I was going to do. So kept it super simple. Swings, clean and press. This was with the help of a coach I've mentioned here before, Mark Wildman. I wouldn't take on this kind of program by myself. So having some kind of guidance and having an idea of where a good place to start is a great example. And I think this applies to anything. It doesn't have to even be training. It could be, maybe the habit you're trying to create is journaling. This is another one that for me has been seemingly impossible to create into a habit. It's something I would really like to make a more regular part of my life, and so far have really struggled to do so. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant, and I just put the links in the chat for people who wanna look up the Atomic Habits from James Clear. What I
Yes.
like to add, it's not just about physical exercise; it's about everything. So what we know, and I there's a lot of research around that. And there's a branch of science called behavioral economics, which studies how we actually behave, how we make economical decisions, and how our brain perceives gains and losses. And we perceive the losses as much more significant when they are happening in the moment. And the same with the gains actually. So most people in these experiments, when they were offered a treat, like a box of chocolate, and they were offered the dilemma: would you like a small chocolate truffle now, or 500 grams of chocolate a month from now?
Sure,
And even
sure.
though this is like a gain or return on investment, like I don't know, hundreds of persons or thousands even, the majority of people just start salivating, and you can't stop yourself from getting the reward now. And
Yeah, yeah.
postponing or canceling the workout, that's the reward right now, while the pain of not progressing and the remorse comes much later.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that test you were talking about, I hadn't heard about the chocolate test with adults, but I heard the marshmallow test with children, which is essentially the same
Oh yeah.
thing. You can have one marshmallow now or two marshmallows in 5 minutes, and most children choose the marshmallow now. 5 minutes is a long time from now. I want that marshmallow. Um, so
Agreed.
yeah, this is again small, digestible, something that you can actually do. So I think you spoke in the last episode we did together. We talked about we're both kind of trying to learn French in our own way. So for a year or so now,
D'accord.
I've been sticking with these apps, and my commitment was my initial commitment was 5 minutes a day. That seems like nothing, right? Like, what is 5 minutes a day? Like, you're not going to learn anything. Okay, well, 5 minutes turns into 15 minutes, and 20 or 30, but even if it's 5 or 10, each day, the compounding effect of that actually leads to a result. So, I found that I was sitting around anyway with my coffee in the morning, and the temptation to open my phone and start looking through emails was very great. I thought, I could use this time to do a 5-minute session on drops and a couple of 3-minute sessions on Duolingo. And while it doesn't seem like much, it's added up. And 400 days later, I understand a lot more words than I did a year prior. So again, like you said, this does not only apply to physical exercise, but anything that you're trying to build into a habit. And I think that muscle is kind of the same. This muscle of training the muscle of being able to do something on a consistent basis, particularly something that isn't instantly rewarding. There's no instant reward for doing 10 minutes of French. In fact, it's kind of infuriating, and it's not that entertaining. And, there's a million other things you'd rather look at. A year later, there's a compounding interest there.
Yeah, tell me about it. I had a class today. I have to say the compound interest on that is now I can have an argument with my French teacher that it's at least partially in French. But it's
Great.
it's really true. I like what you are mentioning there, or explaining that this I think the compound interest is the proper phrase here. And I'm borrowing the term from economics. When we know with learning, the excuse that I'll do it tomorrow, or double down tomorrow, we know on a rational level it doesn't work. And we know also, we have scientific evidence now showing that for the learning, your brain needs time for integration of the knowledge. For workout, your body needs time to actually repair the muscle
That's right.
tissue that you actually intentionally break down during the workout. So
That's
having
right.
a double length workout a day later, it's not going to save you.
Absolutely. And you'll make some mistakes. You'll go too hard and then you'll fall off. I injured my shoulder a few weeks back thinking I was, I'm ready to jump up a weight and I'll do less reps with this. And it was a mistake. I paid for it. I had a couple of weeks of having to kind of step back and switch it up and go a little slower. And then I hit a PR the other day, which was great for me. And so 5 months later, I'm seeing, okay, you're seeing the reward later. And, I catch myself like everyone else comparing myself to people that are not me. Seeing it as like, okay, I've come 5% of the way and there's like so much more to go. Look at this person and look at that person and look how proficient they are with this tool and look at their physique and look at their habit or whatever, and that temptation is great and it will be there. But we've talked about this before, if you can compare yourself to your former self from weeks or months ago, and you look at those incremental gains in whatever it is you're doing. I think we noticed this in our group, just working with this group of 20 people over the course of 6 months and seeing the growth. You don't see it from call to call necessarily, but when you start to look back 6 months and look at how people are showing up in this different way, you see, again, the compounding effect of doing anything on a consistent basis. And then the same goes for a bad habit, right? If you smoke cigarettes every day, you're probably not going to get some lung disease after a week, but after 20 years, it's not going to be looking so good. So the same goes for any small thing.
It's very true, and I guess this is all fairly well established. We know that. I'd like to mention one more concept that's interesting about it, and then I'd like to move to the guilt and the shame when you actually fall off, because
Great.
all of this comes up, right? It's like, yeah, I know that it doesn't make sense when I'm, puffing the cigarette. I know that. I even know it at the moment, yet still, I succumb to the temptation. What I wanted to say is, as one of the techniques that you mentioned, I just want to put this context of economics as well into that. You mentioned the pre-commitment. So deciding, pre-commit, take the decision out of the equation. So I did it by pre-committing, 30 days cold showers, done. And it was not like every morning, do I feel like having cold shower now? No, I don't. So what is suggested also, and this is very relevant, I guess, especially for the people from US, saving for retirement is something that is difficult to tackle because the reward is always more salient when you're spending rather than saving. And I believe Dan Ariely's, the behavioral economist, suggests to pre-commit by not allowing yourself a raise. Meaning every raise you ever get in your job, you pre-commit to go into savings. So you basically use the salary you're having. It's enough to cover your life. You already know that. It covers your needs. So what if you did pre-commit? What if you only gave a raise to your future self that is going to need it desperately later down the road?
Yeah, I think this goes back to being very clear about what your goal is, and having set amounts. If you keep it very vague, I will work out next week, it's a lot less likely to happen than I will run 1 mile on Wednesday at noon or whatever, or I will save X percentage of my paycheck, and this is my financial goal. So in those cases, numbers matter, right? You want to be pretty specific. And again, taking that decision out. Often we are, especially if we're doing our habit at the end of a long day or after a week of making so many little decisions, decision fatigue kicks in. We don't really know what we're doing. If we don't have a very clear path forward, there is so much friction to do the activity that it becomes much easier to not do it. And if we've already gotten into the habit of not doing it, then it's no big deal. Yeah, that will bring us, we can kind of segue into the guilt and the shame that you spoke about, right? Which I think in that case, it can become useful. If that guilt and shame didn't exist, I'm not sure many of us would get the kind of internal motivation that we need to kick in a gear. I think that's true for myself. I can't speak for others, but for myself, I think that has been part of what fuels me to kind of stick to the commitments, is the guilt and the shame of not doing it. And again, I think it does become part of the identity. When you identify as this type of person, if you begin to slack on those things, for me, I feel like, okay, I'm not showing up the way I want to show up. I'm not living in a way that is coherent with what I've decided I want to do and how I want to be.
Absolutely. I think it's no, I just fumbled around. I wanted to find a link, and I left my comfortable tab when I'm here with you. So that's I think the tricky part really comes for me when we are beyond that moment of decision. I think we fairly covered that. Like that's one part of the story. How do you either avert or build a mechanism around this pivotal moment, this crossroad decision, when you can do or not do the next iteration of your habit? But when you're past that moment, I mean, I'm not a smoker, but the habits, that, let's say, the bad habits, let's call it that for the sake of simplicity. If you already lit the cigarettes, I think it's very difficult to kind of stop. And even while you're doing that, many people would have remorse. Even while you're procrastinating, I'm a procrastinator, and while I'm doing that, while I'm go dust the shelves rather than write a paper for work that I should. While I'm dusting the shelf, I'm not happy about polishing my furniture and having perfectly aligned gadgets on my shelf. But I feel the shame. But still, the shame hurts less at the moment than doing the thing. And then, of course, then comes the remorse, and then comes the feeling of guilt and self-loathing and this spiral. So you said you're approaching it from the level of identity, like what you don't want to be. Did it always work for you, or have you ever been in the place of kind of blaming yourself? And how did you get out?
Absolutely, and I still am. And I want to be very clear. I have not mastered this by a long shot. So, I've managed to build some habits that I'm sticking with. They're important to me. Part of that is this wanting to prove to myself, like, I can do this shit, even though I don't really feel like doing it, because long term, I see the value in it. But there are other things that are a little more complex. Like, as you know, I've kind of began taking an interest in coaching people. I've done a little bit of that. And this is something that's a little bit more vague for me right now. I don't have clear outlines of how I'm implementing all of this. So this is something that I'm still working out, how to create consistent, how to do things consistently that are helping me work towards this. So I'm still figuring this stuff out. What worked for kettlebells or French might not work for coaching. Again, I think it comes down to defining, and I've yet to do that for this particular thing, like define exactly what it is I'm going to be doing and when. But now I think we're getting into the value of getting support and having some accountability, and being able to recognize where it is that you're actually flailing or stuck. If you just kind of sit back and you're not clear on it, you don't write anything down, it can just feel like this weight that you're carrying of shittiness of, oh, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that, and I feel awful about myself, and that can lead to kind of paralysis. I'd like for a second to talk about procrastination, because you discussed this. This is something that I've dealt with for a very long time as well. In fact, going into the program that we were both in with Leo Babauta, one of the things in my mind that I was hoping to kind of conquer was this procrastination. I read a book. I believe the author's name was Mary Lamia. She's done some great articles for Psychology Today that I'll share and we can put in the description later. But she described two types of people when it comes to procrastination: those that are deadline driven and those that are task driven. And she wrote this wonderful article, basically making a case for why you should hire a procrastinator. It made me feel, it normalizes the procrastination. And she was mostly interviewing high achievers. And so kind of the takeaway for me was high achievers get it done, whether they're task driven or deadline driven. If you're a procrastinator, you are likely a deadline driven person. So then the question is, okay, do you procrastinate, but then are you getting it done at the last minute? So you mentioned not writing something for work, you're dusting the shelves. But is the article or the task getting done? Because if so, this really just points to the deadline-driven personality type. For me, I'm very much deadline-driven. So again, if I leave it open, if I don't have a very specific time and date that I'm committing to doing something, then it's very likely to get pushed aside or pushed back even indefinitely. There has to be a hard deadline for me to get into action. And like you, I might dust the shelves or find a million other things to do until that clock starts ticking and I know that I don't have any time left. All the energy is mustered up and boom, out comes the result. And I think that is something we can train for, so we can build around this. But it was kind of liberating to recognize that there's a distinct kind of personality type that just operates that way. And for me, I don't know if you relate with this at all. For me, when I know the deadline is there, but it's a while away, I'm kind of working on it subtly internally and always kind of carrying it with it and tinkering. And then as the deadline approaches, I'll kick it into gear and kind of give it a real push.
Yeah, I would say sadly deadline driven. I'm saying sadly, but with hesitation. I'm trying to kind of make peace with that. This article was very interesting for me, and when you shared it the first time, and I put a link into comments for whoever wants to check it. It's something that helps. Definitely, it helps me to make peace with that. What is still tricky for me, and we can move to that, is how do I work backwards from the end state and not try to kind of cram everything to the last minute? Because the way I operate, I was able to kind of muster my energy, and you know these red-eyed nights when you kind of cram on the project to catch the deadline, but you can't. You can finish a paper, you can finish a task, but you can't build cathedrals this way. You can't really create anything significant. That requires this incremental step by step, and you can't build a muscle overnight or learn French. So very much so.
No, as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. And I think that's the key. So in a task like writing something, for me, what's worked in the past is breaking it into smaller chunks and creating deadlines for myself within that. But I have to actually do that step for it to work. If I don't do that step and it's just living in my mind, then it's going to just play out the same way it always plays out, which is wait until the last possible minute and then pour all my energy into it and get it done. Yeah. And now I try to outsource for as many tasks like that as possible, and free myself up in that way.
Yeah, there's another book I think is very practical. At least it was for me. So it's a book from Pierce Steele, which is kind of it's a name that I thought is like too good to be true. It's one of these fancy names that you would give
That's a
yourself as
good
a
one.
secret agent when you're 7. But he's a real scientist, and this book. This book actually outlines the reasons why we put stuff off. So there are multiple. He talks about 4 types of procrastinators, and he suggests to kind of break it down into what is the reason you're avoiding. And this is not the same for everybody. You can avoid it because you're afraid, but you can also avoid it because the task is boring and you just
Yeah.
you can avoid it because it's too difficult, but also because it's easy and boring. So not doing your taxes is a different type of procrastination than not confronting your boss and asking for a raise. And
Yeah.
treating all of those in the same fashion, Steele argues, is not going to bring us the best results. So
Yeah.
understanding where you are will bring you closer to what the right remedy is for you. If you're bored by the task, you can spice it up by adding some gamification elements, spicing it up. If you're avoiding it out of fear, this probably is not the best approach. But unfortunately, most of these magazine articles are treating it all with this cookie cutter approach, always the same way, and this is not always productive.
Yeah. Yeah. I laughed when you mentioned taxes because I completed my taxes on tax day this year, which is not unusual. On the extended day. Which is kind of the way that it's been for me. And again, that's a perfect explanation of it being just something boring that you just don't feel like dealing with. Um, so yeah, I haven't heard of Pure Steel, so I'll check that one out. That's interesting to me. And yeah, I think it's helpful to look at a lot of these things as experiments and be willing to play with it and be willing to figure out, sometimes you figure out 9 ways not to do something before you find that way that works for you. And that's fine. And I think it's important to remember not to take it too seriously. Give ourselves a little bit of time, but try something. If that's what if something is important enough to you that not doing it will cause you the shame, the guilt, and you'll be carrying it with you, then it's probably worth figuring out a way to get moving on it. If it's not that important and you're going to forget all about it, then maybe it's not worth your time to begin with. So we're a little vague here, but I think, again, depending, like the example you gave, whether it's talking to your boss and requesting a raise or doing your taxes, yeah, I think these would require different methods. Yeah.
I actually like that you brought the discussion in this direction, because that's where I would like to move, considering also the time we have left. I'd like to talk about what happens when you fail or question the task. Um, you mentioned, and I totally agree that a lot of our endeavors is experimentation. You're also kind of trying to find out what works for you. But in my mind, more often than not, I'm letting myself off the hook through rationalization. So we always, as you said, our mind can come up with 9 reasons why this is the perfect reason to get yourself off the hook. One of them, at least one of them, could be very legitimate. Maybe this is really not good for you. Maybe I'm not going to be an astronaut or ballet dancer. And maybe this really was something that was not meant for me to do. I may not be enjoying it. I think I used this in our group calls in the past. There's this example. It's like maybe eating chili peppers. So avoiding it, not even trying to taste it. That's probably avoidance. But how many chili peppers does it take for me to swallow before I can say, yeah, this is not for me? and not feeling that this is a rationalization, not being
Mm-hmm.
willing to
Mm-hmm.
face the pain. Do you have an answer
Yeah.
for yourself?
The closest thing to an answer would be taking a look at if something is worth doing at all. And if it is worth doing, then it's worth doing well. And if it's not worth doing, then it might just not be worth doing. And it might be worth completely letting go of that particular thing. I think this gets tricky when you're working for other people and you might be procrastinating on an assignment that on the small scale is not going to significantly impact your life. But if you keep flaking on these little assignments, you may lose your job, right? So in the grand scheme of things, those little things are important. For me, it kind of goes back to designing the ideal lifestyle and being able to kind of back up and take a more macro look at how is this going to help me work towards the type of life that I want, or become the type of person I want, have the type of body that I want, the health that I want, whatever the case may be. And so for me, that's where the motivation comes in. And I think that comes as a result of being intimately familiar with the other option of not doing anything about it, of wallowing, of ruminating, of living with the shame, the guilt, and feeling like there is a ton of untapped potential. So if these ideas are living in your head, if you feel called to do this thing, give it a shot or don't. And I think the other thing is there isn't necessarily a right or wrong here, right? These are options, these are choices. So likely these are not going to be life or death decisions, and you'll probably be fine if you don't do any of this shit. But if it's living in your mind and you have these ideas and you kind of can envision yourself as a type of person that works a little bit more like this or a little bit more like that, or takes on a little bit more of these activities, then it's worth pursuing, and it's worth failing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to go deeper into the failing later on again. I know we've been there, but let me before we move on, let me use this moment to pause and kind of announce something, and also open it up for the two of us. So you and me, we committed to do this regularly. This is a commitment we took for the reasons we mentioned in previous video. We love these talks between the two of us, but we also believe this can add value to the lives of other people. What we haven't done, and I'm very guilty of that. I was saying that and didn't do that. I was like, yeah, we need to kind of commit to a topic a little bit in advance, to announce it to people, to allow them to join us. Because however fun it is to be here just with our own echo, I wouldn't mind if more people were joining us live. So
Sure.
what I suggest, Raphael, maybe every week we could actually commit to an overarching topic for the next one. What do you say?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And if you're watching this and you have some sort of idea or topic that you would like to hear discussed, please don't hesitate to send us a message or comment. And we'd even welcome you on as a guest.
I love it. That's the spirit. And what's the reason I mention it right now is because I know you are big on this. Do not plan for retirement, plan for sustainable lifestyle. You mentioned that. I know this is a topic that is going to be coming back for us multiple times. But what if we talked about that next week? What if we talked about this kind of sustainable lifestyle and the balanced
Designing your ideal
lifestyle?
lifestyle. Yes, and this was motivated by one of James Clear's 321 emails, and I just want to back you up a little. I did not say don't plan for retirement. You should definitely plan for retirement.
Sure.
However, building towards an ideal lifestyle, like he says, can often be attained in a matter of a few years rather than a few decades. And your ideal lifestyle should take into account the fact that you're likely to live several more decades, however old you are. And with that information, you can begin to plan for retirement. Having some clarity about what that life looks like. And again, this can come down to habits of tracking and budgeting and all these other, this can branch out so many ways. So I'd be happy to discuss that. That'd be fun.
Okay, that's a pledge. We're going to talk about it next week. However, we are keeping the series, yet changing the date for us. So due to some logistical challenges, we want to switch to Tuesdays, and next one is going to be in 6 days. So good news, you don't have to wait that long. Is it going to be the same time, Raphael?
Yeah, Tuesdays, 10 Pacific.
7 p.m. CEST. Perfect.
Great.
Sounds good. Well, let's get back to our topic. So you mentioned that it's important to realize what kind of identity, what kind of life I want to create. If I don't really care about it, maybe I should let it slide, and I shouldn't kind of beat myself into becoming that. So I was thinking all the time, so ballet dancer or astronaut, and I realized I don't want to be either. And a world would be a less comical place without those, definitely. Now I'm picturing, an astronaut ballet dancing in the full suit, but it's sometimes tricky to tell unless you really have a taste of that chili pepper or whatever it is. I did try this 30 days experiment for myself, just to test my determination for something. I don't think I really did that for crafting my lifestyle or identity, because it seems to me, and now I'm going into very unprepared territory in here. All of this identity building for me is a very long-term commitment. Even building a decent physique, getting more resilient, it would be 12 weeks, I'd say, at least, before you can really look back and see results. We talk about 6 months in our program. How do you approach experiments like that when you decide to get a taste of something? And do you set yourself a deadline, say, I'm going to try this for 6 weeks no matter what? Did you do that with French? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so with the language lessons, my commitment was to do it for the kind of length of the program we were in, which was 6 months. Although I started in, it was April initially. And I'm just under 400 days in. It felt good enough to kind of stick with it. Kettlebells was the same thing for me, 6 months. And I'm just at about the 6-month mark. And I actually feel like I'm just now really picking up a little bit of momentum and learning so much. And again, I kept it super simple. I don't have access to a trainer. I live an hour from the closest gym. I want to prevent injury. So learned as much as I could doing videos, and again, took some of the decisions out, kept it super simple, selected some, just a handful of exercises that I could repeat over and over and over until I was proficient in them. And so that has seemed to work for me. And so depending on what the type of habit it is, I think 60 days is a pretty good place to start for a lot of things, to kind of get a feel. And if it's a daily habit, it's different than something that you do once or twice a week. So doing something every day after 60 days, it really does kind of become part of the routine. Now with the languages, for me, after a while, the mornings stopped working out for me. I was finding I wanted to be doing other things. So I began getting a little bit loose about what time of day I was doing it. And I was able to still commit, but what happened was the amount of time I spent on it dropped significantly. So when I was doing it every day at the same time, the plan was my butt hits the chair, I have my coffee, I'm in it. I was getting a consistent like 30 to 40 minutes each morning for quite a few months. And when I began to waver from that, it was more like 10 to 20 minutes, and just honestly feeling like I'm just going through the motion and just doing it to check it off the list a lot of days, but to prove myself that I'm still with it. So that's kind of where I am with it now. Still doing it daily, not spending nearly as much time on it, but still there. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanna add like a personal comment on this. How long does it take to build a habit? And people ask those questions. There are answers in the in the media, but also there is research about it. How long does it take to build a habit? And you can I think see anything between 30 days and 60 days. I want to mention like how it was for me with some habits. So for the daily ones, as you mentioned, Raphael, for me, I tried like a month without YouTube, month with cold showers only, a month without any sweets or candy or any sugar, and I'm a sugar junkie, so that was hard. A month without coffee, stuff like that. Normally, it took me like after for all of those I mentioned, after 8 to 10 days, the pain of the deprivation started going away. Not sooner than that. And after like 3 weeks, I was able to see the change as potentially positive. So, for example, with the sugar, and I think it could be salt or spices, whatever. After 3 weeks only, my taste buds kind of adjusted to the lack of these strong impressions you have from heavily processed food, and I was able to actually taste vegetables as something that is pleasant rather than annoying. So I'd say that's how it was for me. A 10-day mark is the mark. If I hit the 10-day mark, then the pain will go away significantly. It is still there, but it's manageable. And after 3 weeks, I'm able to kind of start enjoying some instances of the habit. But having said that, there's always a but. I actually love what James Clear has to say about it. Raphael, I know you know what I mean. He says like, why would you care how long it takes to build a habit? Because you're not building a habit for 30 days. You're not building it for 60 days. You're building the habit because that's what you want to become. You want to be doing it for the rest of our life. So that's how long it takes. Why would you care?
That's
And
right.
it's very
That's right.
inspiring.
Yeah, and there's not some magic moment after 60 days where now it's easy to oh, now this is exactly what I do. I don't have a temptation to check my email anymore. I'm just opening this app and doing this instead. No, there's this is where the discipline really does come in. There is a certain level of just having to be with what you don't want to be with, and getting good at that. So that for me has been part of the challenge. So there are a lot of days where I'm like, I don't care about learning French right now. I don't want to even do this right now. Why am I sticking to it? And I recognize, well, this is contributing to the type of person that I want to be, and it's helping me strengthen the muscle of doing something that I don't feel like doing. So right now it's French. Later it might be something else, and developing some consistency with anything. But yeah, there's no magic thing that happens necessarily. There are a lot of things that I've built that have taken years, and sometimes it still feels very challenging. At the same time, some things become, for example, yoga. I've been practicing yoga for many years now, and if it's unlikely that I'll go more than a day without some sort of a practice, and it's actually become easier for me to do it my body looks forward to doing these types of movements now. I see the benefit, and even immediately. So, we talked about not seeing the results from one workout, but actually that's not completely true. If you spend 20 minutes doing some kind of cardiovascular exercise, get your heart rate up, break a sweat, you are going to notice something. You're not going to feel the same way that you did prior to doing the act. So
No, that's true. That's true. I think it's also good to know that for me this comes from the um, two different mindsets we have. Like, and I'm going to use bike metaphor because I love biking. It's are you approaching this from the mentality of someone who wants to pedal or someone who just wants to coast? And I honestly think there's a balance needed in the two. So there are people who say you need to push all the time, right, and never rest, never settle, because then you're gonna fall behind. For me, this is very like a merciless approach. Of course, it's possible, but for me personally, this would lead to burnout. But uh, you
yeah,
can't coast all the time, expecting that you do 30 days of habit. The question basically is, when can I start coasting for the rest of my life? When can I
yeah,
get off the diet so I'm good for the rest of my life eating whatever I want? And it's like, yeah, you can coast for a while, like on a bike, but eventually you need to pedal a little.
sure. I like that you mentioned that, and I think that it's worth mentioning that you can both push and relax. So yoga is a great example of this. When you're in a very challenging posture, it's not push and force yourself into this. That's a great way to get injured, and that defeats the purpose. You want to be relaxing, you want to breathe, you want to find where you can soften. And I've found the same to be true for a lot of physically demanding things. There is a way where we can relax ourselves physically and mentally, and still show up for the activity. So you can pedal and you can put all of yourself into pedaling and still be relaxed. Your muscles aren't relaxed. You're contracting, you're creating movement, and you're generating power with your body. But that doesn't mean you're biting down on your teeth and clenching, and you're going to force yourself into this. So I think that there's a key there. And back to what I was talking about with identity, I recognize all of this as just a story that I'm telling myself. I don't believe that this is what I am, but I found that it's helpful to have this story. For me, I found that it helps me stick to the habits. So while I believe that this is just a very small portion of who I am, I recognize that developing these things contribute to the overall structure that is my life. And so I think that while they may just be stories, they can be helpful in that way. And I may have gotten a little bit lost in the weeds there, but I thought it was relevant.
Yeah, and actually in that, and I think it ties nicely into the ending of this call and our topic for the next time, because we will discuss the topic of sustainable lifestyle, or ideal lifestyle, if you will. And I like that. I like that approach. That for sustainable content and fulfilled life, you need to find a balance between the moments when you push or pedal, if you will, and the moments when you kind of get a release, when you coast. And managing this balance, it's an ongoing exercise, and
Indeed.
something that definitely deserves its own topic.
That's right. Like you said earlier in the call, your muscles grow during the rest and recovery phase, not during the strenuous activity, right?
Very much so. So, Raphael, thank you for the chat today again,
My
and
pleasure.
I'm looking forward to see you and whoever is going to join us this time on Tuesday next week. So we're going to be here at the same time, It's gonna be, well, it's gonna be the 1st of June. Amazing. So the first of the new month, we're gonna tackle the topic of finding sustainable lifestyle and what's coming up for us and what have we learned along the way and what is maybe yet to learn in the future.
Excellent. Looking forward to it, Aleš.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Goodbye, all.